Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is part 7 and the final episode of our conference tournament preview series. It's been a marathon, but Duck and I have been doing our part. Stucky and just an ever expanding group of experts here at BBOC have led you through the wilderness. We're going to finish here, get through all 31 conferences, and we've had a blast sweating it out. Some of it has been at the expense of regular season champs Belmont, Navy, UNC Wilmington, Central Arkansas, all these teams that had the potential at least to throw a scare into a highly rated team in the big dance in the field of 68. They're all out. So I'll start there with you, Duck, in terms of licking our wounds. I know that Navy was personal for you. You did the right thing. You covered up a little bit by taking some action on Lehigh in the futures market. But just the end of that game. And I'll also put it out there. I had St. Thomas to win the Summit, and I had Navy in a money line parlay. Both teams had the ball, shot clock unplugged, tie game, end of regulation, and somehow they lost in regulation. They gave the Navy scored too quickly, gives up basically the half court shot to Boston U, and then St. Thomas disastrous final possession where their guard drives in, dishes it, no look back into the middle of the defense, gives up a run out, and they foul with zero point 0.1 seconds on the clock, and they end up falling there. Just brutal time management. We talk about it a lot in football where you can see the difference between the coaches that understand time management and the coaches that do not. For basketball, it seems like it should be even simpler. Like if you're tied and the shot clock is off and the other team is not pressing, why are you putting yourself in a position where you're not taking the last shot? But that's the way it is at this time of year. Navy, it's more forgivable. You had it in Bignani's hands. He's the player of the year. He's the guy who's worked his way for that moment for 4 years. He's a fighter pilot, all the story, the aura, everything. And he scored. He made it. The only thing is that they were discombobulated because of the speed in which he scored, and they just put themselves in a position where they did not want to foul. That's when you look at the body language on the replay, that's what was showing up more than anything for the middies. Additionally, they didn't run the clock for like a dribble and a half. That wasn't great. But at the end of it, I mean, I had to go back, and I'm sure you've been like this before, Duck. I had to bring out my own stopwatch. He still got the shot off, even if they started it the instant that he touched it. All that being said, of Belmont, UNC Wilmington, Central Arkansas, and Navy, money aside, I know that it was a real gut punch for you, which should have been the right pick. You got Navy at what, minus 120, a wonderful price. But of those four teams, which one, I should say, is the one that you regret not making it to March Madness the most?
I think it would have been really exciting to see the Tommies in there. I think Navy would have put a real scare into a three seed as a 14. I think Belmont losing the way that they did, you saw this sort of apathetic nature at about the 13-minute mark in their regular season finale against Illinois State. They had built a double-digit lead, just could not keep the momentum going, and that clearly spilled over to their game against Drake. I mean, they were just so ill prepared defensively, and we know that Belmont's defense is not going to be exquisite. We just needed mid-level defense. Just can start contesting some shots. It just they could never get over the hump and really regain control after they went up 7 points early, and they just were chasing and constantly behind and couldn't get shots to fall. I thought Belmont was a very dangerous team. They run such a unique offense. Casey Alexander's been there before. I was very surprised that they bowed out the way that they did. And getting blown out by a Drake team that had lost nine in a row coming into the Missouri Valley tournament, very, very disappointing for Belmont.
Two ideas that I have. One, there's some conferences that we've seen the Sun Belt's the extreme version of it, where you're giving teams, that red carpet all the way to the semifinals. I love that. I'd take it one step further. I want to incentivize the postseason structure because particularly when you're playing on campus sites and you're not playing at a neutral site that you have to worry about, leases or rentals or whatever they do to be able to get those contracts. Why not have it be okay? The number one seed gets a red carpet to the semis. If they go undefeated in regular season play in conference, they get an auto bye to the championship game. I think that would be a cool feature. I think it would add even more juice into the regular season, giving more emphasis on running the table. The second part of it, and we're going to get into it with this Ivy preview, where Cornell is not the top team, but they get to play on their home floor, a huge advantage in that regard. I'd love to see conferences, particularly the smaller, low majors, really have some fun at the beginning of the season and either come up with some kind of tournament format, or I'll even go crazier. How about a 3-point shootout? Take every school's best 3-point shooter, have a 3-point shooting competition. The winner gets the home court for the conference tournament. Just putting it out there because it's clear you can make up any rules that you want. And unfortunately, I think by, feeling they needed to be shackled to certain formats or previous venues or whatever it is. They're leaving their best teams on the sideline and not getting them to the field of 68. And that's really where you get the massive exposure, the money for the brand, the money for the conference to win those games in March Madness. So I think really every opportunity should be, put on the table for some of these smaller leagues. Have as much fun. I can certainly say, as a college basketball fanatic, if the MEAC or the Summit started with, a one-on-one competition or a three-point shooting competition for home court, that would be really cool. All right, enough from me. Let's get into the conferences. We're going to start with the Mid-American, one that we obviously loved throughout the entire season. And I'm just going to put a cap on this whole Miami of Ohio. Should they be respected as an at-large? Do they need to win this? Their schedule was so weak. I view it as it's almost like a McDonald's analogy. The Miami of Ohio story to me is like a new restaurant opening with no fanfare, and out of nowhere they get a Michelin star. Everyone focused on the perfection. It's amazing that we got that 10-1 ticket. I gave it out here on the show on the Action Network for them to go undefeated in the regular season. That was an all-timer, future for me. I'm gonna have it framed. But that zero in the loss column, I think, has covered up something else that's really obvious, which is they played in so many close, so many fun, high-scoring thrillers throughout the entire season. We should be enjoying that. I mean, you even had Steele knocking over the DJ speaker. You got the whole team MF and the Ohio student section because they were throwing crap on the court. Like that was absolute theater of, A plus plus variety. And it's just fun. Like, just embrace it. I know this is a gambling show. We're always going to give you the gambling angles, but there's no reason to view this as something other than something to be enjoyed. And I think the big contingent of the Power Conference teams and fans, to me, they're like McDonald's fans. They're like, oh, your food's great. You want a Michelin star? Well, what's your, how many people have you served? What's your annual revenue? What's your EBITDA? Like, I don't give a shit. I will also eat at McDonald's. I'll have that big arch. I'll eat it in a much more comprehensive fashion than their CEO did, taking his little bites and calling it a product and all that weird stuff. Like, I'm not above watching Auburn play or watching games just because I want to see a five-star kid or a kid who's going to play in the NBA. But this idea that Miami of Ohio, all of their theatrics, the product that they put on the court doesn't count because these guys aren't going to be in the NBA and they weren't ballyhooed transfers or high school recruits is ridiculous. And I think that's the beauty of college sports. You have no guarantees. Kevin Durant won one game in the NCAA tournament. You have, year after year, you have future pros littering some of these teams, and they go out early. So I'm still confused why there's any pushback on this Miami team. All of that being said, they're spent. They're drained. They did it. They are in the record books. They're immortalized. This is Akron's tournament. The Zips are going to win this tournament. Minus 115 out in the market. I'd play it up to minus 140. Book it. Their road is Buffalo, who's down free tag. I think it would be a miracle if he comes off, the injured list. He has a concussion. He hasn't played in weeks. Even if he were to return, I think, Buffalo's just playing a watered down version of Akron's basketball. They want to be able to beat teams by scoring, and they're not going to score more than the Zips. Akron beat them by 19 and 15. Next up is likely a Kent State team that wants to push tempo just like Akron, but they're another version that's just not as good as the Akron team, and they rely so much on Gillespie to do it all, to do all the dirty work. Well, Akron crushed him both times that they played. They totally neutralized him with Lyles, held him 6 points below his scoring average and 4 rebounds below his rebounding average. So I think if that ends up with a Miami against Akron title game, I think they're going to finish the job. They led by 4 at Millett Hall. Keep this in mind. With 3:30 to go, they just couldn't get across the finish line. And a big element in that particular game was the hometown whistles for the Redhawks. 30 foul shots in that game. You're likely not to see that again in a neutral site game. This is going to be Tavari Johnson's introduction to the nation. He's going to give them 60 plus across 3 games. He's going to be a household name rolling into the tournament. They'll probably be a 12 seed, and they'll be a problem as a 12 seed. I think this is all Zips. I tried to talk myself into Kent. I tried to talk myself into Miami having pulled so many rabbits out of their hat. But I think this one is, I mean, the national media went, oh, wow, Miami's not even favored in this tournament. They shouldn't be. They're not as good as Akron. And I think Akron should be closer to minus 200 here. So anything minus 140 or better, I think you got to play the Zips. What's your take on the Mid-American as a whole here, Duck?
Well, let's unpack Miami of Ohio. How far has the perception of this sport come since the NIL era? The the upset-minded teams or the Cinderella stories were celebrated for so many years in this tournament. We all remember the Vermont team that beat Syracuse or Bucknell upsetting Kansas. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There was a point in time in this sport where Gonzaga was considered a Cinderella team, and we have an opportunity to do that with Miami of Ohio, whether they win this tournament or not. And people are up in arms about Miami of Ohio getting in over a 15 loss Auburn team or a team like New Mexico or potentially Cincinnati or San Diego State, teams that are in
And
free
just to
fall down
jump
the
in real quick,
stretch.
by the way, Evan Mia has already quantified it. He said this is the weakest bubble of all time in terms of the teams where they stack up wins, above the average bubble team, all of it, the distance between the teams on the bubble and the teams at the top of the sport. He said it's not even particularly close. 2026 is the weakest year. So to have a team with a weak schedule like Miami run the table, they should be totally protected. They should be in a consideration, even with a loss here in Cleveland on the 9 or the 10 line. Forget about having to play a playing game in Dayton. Sorry, go ahead.
And you just look at concomitant to the landscape of today, NIL is tearing these teams apart, and Miami of Ohio stayed together to give it one more run. These are people who grew up in the program and matured and were developed here by Travis Steele at Miami of Ohio. We should celebrate this bunch. They're a good basketball team. Are they a team that's going to the Elite Eight and is going to rip through the bracket? I don't necessarily think so, but let's let it play it out on the floor, right? They have not lost a single game. I think Miami of Ohio deserves to get in regardless of what happens. With that said, I don't have much to add here. Honestly, Akron is the team that I bet to win this tournament. I think that they're a head and shoulders above everybody else. You just go up and down the Akron lineup of players that they have: Tavari Johnson, Amani Lyles, the Mahaffey brothers, Shama Scott. There's so much talent with Akron. They're so athletic and physical in the post, both on offense and defense. And the path is clearly defined for them. Having to line up against Buffalo without free tag should not be much of a challenge. Kent State could, in theory, provide a challenge, but Akron has handled Kent State twice. I think you pencil Akron into the final, and it doesn't matter who they play, they're going to be laying 5 or 6 points. This is honestly a bargain here. This is a situation where generally in these conference futures, I'm not wanting to lay odds, but this is one where I think it's okay to. I even think at minus 120, minus 125, where we're getting to with Akron, you're still in a good spot. I could see if you're a long shot player and you're trying to take a flyer, Bowling Green at plus 2,200 is mispriced. They're going to be in a coin flip game with Toledo to open up. They can beat Toledo. They can beat Miami of Ohio or UMass, whoever were to advance through on that other side. So Bowling Green is a team where if you're wanting to take a shot, I'm not advocating that they're going to win this tournament, but they are mispriced at 22 to 1. Miami of Ohio, you look at their path, and it's a fairly difficult path. I mean, UMass took these guys to the wire twice, and that's who they open up with. And then you've got Toledo or Bowling Green, who can either one of them can put a scare into Miami of Ohio. So I think Miami's path is much more difficult. Akron has more top end talent. They have a clear path to the final. Akron is the play to win this tournament here.
All right, let's jump now to the A10. The elephant in the room there, obviously, is St. Louis's drop off in the last 2, 3 weeks. They got as high as 24th in Ken Palm, and it was deserved, but they've gone 3-3 to close the year. And that Dayton and Georgetown, those games, they got drilled. I mean, this 3-3 finish has them 190th in Torvik since mid-February, 247th in defense. They've been super sloppy with the basketball. Now, some of it's shooting variance. Opponents have been locked in from deep, making 38% from three in the last 6 games. But I mean, you need to keep in mind how different they are today than they were, let's call it the middle of the season, because when they opened 24-1, 21st in Torvik, 30th in adjusted defense, first in opponent three-point percentage, 27.6, and they led the nation in effective field goal percentage on the offensive end at north of 61%. And it's not as easy as saying, can Avila, get it going again? Has Thames, kind of plateaued? Has he leveled off the bench? This whole team has been in a funk. And from a playable perspective at plus 130, not for me. I am not interested in taking a team that is limping to the finish line here. So before I get into my play and my sleeper, I just want your thoughts on the Billikens. Is it too late for them to get this turned around? Because when they opened in that first 25 game stretch, they looked like not only a team that was going to get a 6 or a 7 out of a league like the A10, but they were probably going to go to the second weekend. And now I'm not even sure that they're going to make it, a win or more in the A10 tournament.
Yeah, the operation with Slew, man, oh man, this team has shown some weakness over the last couple of weeks, and it just appears that the horse and pony show really doesn't look the same on the road. The defense was just shredded by George Mason in a 29-point loss on the road, and it's not the mojo that I would want my team having going into the conference tournament. I think we've seen with other mid-major one seeds like Navy, Wilmington, Belmont, even ETSU, who's been in dogfights every single game in the SoCon. I don't want to be taking short odds with these guys right now because it just doesn't look right. They could go on a run in this tournament and easily dispatch either George Washington or Fordham and then go on from there. But I'm not wanting to bet on that. This team is very talented. I think they're well coached, but the proof is in the pudding. It has not looked right over the last 6 games, so I'm not interested at the current price at St. Louis here.
All right, let's talk about a team I am interested in at the current price, plus 750 on the Dayton Flyers. Let's go back to the preseason, the A10 media poll. The league basically got pegged. I mean, it's just, flopping the order a bit, but it went VCU, St. Louis, Dayton 1, 2, 3. They were the only three programs that had first place votes from the media. Dayton got as high as 59 in KenPom, but then injuries and a four-game losing streak in January, it really appeared that their season was lost. But then they won six straight. They nearly made it seven, falling to VCU in the regular season finale. And Emile Letang has flashed some massive potential. Now that he's healthy, he was in a walking boot earlier in the year, took some time to get his minutes back up, get into game shape. He had 43 points, 20 rebounds, 8 assists, and 6 stocks in back-to-back wins over Duquesne and St. Louis. I think that was his coming out party. Javon Bennett has also found his shooting stroke from deep, and that's what's made them much more dangerous offensively. Now, the path, the reason why this is plus 750 and not closer to 5-1, the path is treacherous. They likely got George Mason, SLU, and then VCU. But, they got drilled, they drilled George Mason at home by 15, SLU by 15 at home as well. And it was a 2 point game with VCU with under two to play last week. So I like how they're playing right now. And I think in terms of the apples to apples, it's just a question of, do you prefer, at least one gimme game in a broader tournament like this where you have to win at least 3 or 4 games to cut down the nets? Or would you prefer a team that is proven at the very top of, their ceiling in terms of play, particularly in the last month that they can get it done? My only other reservation, Anthony Grant has never made a deep run in this tournament. He's not a great tournament coach. I think they have all the pieces to get this done. And now, obviously, there's no at-large chances whatsoever. They got to cut down the nets to make the tournament. But with the way SLU is playing, how competitive they were with VCU, I think this is an opportunity for Dayton to get it done. I think if you can stack as many of those 5 to 8 to 1 kind of tickets that you really believe in a team's core fundamentals, and you kind of sprinkle that out and mitigate your risk and spread out that risk, eventually you're going to come out of conference tournament week in the black. I'm hoping this is one that gets me there. What are your thoughts on the Flyers, a team that we were high on, then we were low on, then we were unsure of? Where do you come down on Grant and his boys right now?
Yeah, and I'm interested to talk about my long shots here coming up later on the A10. We'll spend some time on that. But I had the exact same notes written down for Dayton, a team that can make a run. They won 7 of 9 games down the stretch. They're getting healthier with Letang, Malcolm Thomas, Jordan Durkak all back in the fold. I mean, these guys beat St. Louis fair and square on February 24th. They wouldn't play VCU. They were swept by VCU, but they wouldn't play VCU until the final. I absolutely think that Dayton is trending in the right direction. And I mean, they're healthier. Their profile is completely different than when we saw them in mid-January lose 4 games in a row. I think Dayton is absolutely dangerous and can. I know that there's some concerns with Anthony Grant, and that is a very real thing in his coaching profile. But I mean, Dayton really has something to prove here. I think that regular season didn't go very well here in the middle of the season with all the turmoil that the Flyers faced. And now that they're healthier, they're playing good basketball. I absolutely think that this is a team that can. And we didn't compare notes on this either, by the way. I want everyone listening in to know, like, we don't compare notes and just this isn't groupthink. I had the exact same thing written down for Dayton, a team that I think is live in this tournament.
All right, we'll see if we can make this a clean sweep and start in lieu of like a mind meld or something like that. George Washington, they're my sleeper, 16-1. The Revolutionaries, they have every potential outcome on the table. They could lose to Fordham in the second round. I wouldn't be shocked. Or they could get hot, grab every single offensive rebound in sight, and make a run to the championship. Castro's return makes all of it possible. And SLU, as we mentioned, is no longer this unbeatable foe in the quarters. They gave Florida a scare early in the year. They only lost by 10, but it was a single-digit game late. They beat South Florida. They nearly beat St. Louis at their place, losing by 3 at one of the most difficult, mid-major venues to win at in the entire sport. They've been close. They just need to get hot from three. They have the shooters, but they absolutely need to have at least back-to-back, multi or excuse, double-digit three-point games, I think, to get there because their offense can leave a lot to be desired. That game against Dayton recently, where they lost by two at home, that was a spot that I thought they were going to get across the finish line. They couldn't knock down enough shots. So it's going to come down to their shooters. But the fact that I have Castro back, he's arguably the best player in this entire league. What he brings from a rebounding and defensive perspective, I'd like to see them get him a few more touches on the low block, but he can create so much of his own offense on the offensive glass. 16 to 1, it's priced to move. I'm in on GW. Particularly if we look back and St. Louis lays an egg in the quarters, you're going to wish that you had a 16 to 1 ticket on GW.
Very possible. They're actually 18 to 1 at Caesars, so if you like him, bet him there. And yet, why did they lose to Loyola Chicago at the end of the regular
One of
season?
the stranger
Just
outcomes the entire year. I don't know if it was a pure look ahead. I have to look back at the math. I mean, I believe it was impossible for them to move up in terms of the rounds. So maybe they just mailed it in. Still not a great look for a team that needs momentum. You want to see them playing their best basketball. I just think in terms of the five guys that they're going to put on the court surrounding, Castro, this is the kind of team that I think can surprise and grind out some wins. And by being, in a position to catch St. Louis in their first game, I think that also needs to be stated. I think if St. Louis gets it going and all of a sudden they're playing back to back to back games and they start to feel good about themselves and the offensive flow is back, then all of a sudden I think things could shift quickly for them. But if you wanted to grab them, you want to play them in that first game where they're coming off, essentially just warm-ups and no game action in more than a week.
Yeah, and that's the danger with the number one seeds. We've seen that time and time again. It's not the number one seed who wins a game early and then falls later on. It's that very first game after a significant rest. Couple I'm looking at St. Joseph's. They were 22 to 1 earlier in the weekend, down to 15 to 1. But a team that went 10 and 2 down the stretch, they beat George Mason. They struggled early in adjusting to life without Deuce Jones, but really came on toward the end of the year. I think this team can go to the semis, and they're really being priced, although as if they can't. I look at the Hawks, they play exquisite defense. They can really do some things in the lane to frustrate their opponents. These guys defeated all three of their potential quarterfinal opponents recently, and they took VCU to the wire on the road. I think St. Joe's could get to the final. So 15 to 1, I'm in on them. But then the other one we talked about briefly, George Mason, 40 to 1. This is a team that has wins this season over each of the top three seeds. They've defeated Davidson, George Washington. These guys can play. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater on George Mason. These guys were 18 and 1 at one point in the season, and there was large conversation being had about the A10 and if George Mason was worthy of at-large consideration. That ship has sailed, but these guys are very dangerous. I like that they'll get a tune-up game against LaSalle or St. Bonnie before they play Dayton. Maybe they get a little positive momentum going into that quarterfinal bout with the Flyers. I think George Mason is a team that could win this whole thing.
I like the George Mason look. It's just interesting that there's a bunch of teams in this league that when you look at their ceiling, you say to yourself, this is a tournament team. This is a team that deserves to get in as an at-large, potentially. But you have to look at the full body of work, whether there's injuries, whether there's a cold streak, whether it was difficulty winning away from home. There's obviously warts on every single team's resume. That's why I'm a bit surprised that there's 18 to 1s on GW. What did you say? 40 to 1 on George Mason. I think that's mispriced, just flat out. I think that's basically trying to paint this league as a top three league only in terms of the teams that can win it. And I don't see it that way, particularly the way that the bracket shook out. All right, let's look at the Ivy, a league that's a lot easier to preview because there's only four. They're going to be playing on Cornell's campus. Yale, the favorite, minus 125. Cornell, plus 280. Harvard, close to 5 to 1. Penn, 7 to 1. The interesting thing right off the bat, back in the good old days of the Ancient Eight, Yale takes the auto bid. They won the regular season. They don't have to sweat this out. They, won the regular season by a full game over Harvard. But now they have to win twice. They have to do it on the road, and starting against Cornell on their home floor, this is a Big Red team that just beat them 72-69 in Ithaca. And Cornell has the makeup of a perfect Cinderella. They shoot 40% from three-point range in Ivy League play. They make over 12 triples per game. So right off the bat, if I'm playing Yale, I'm sweating, which is not what you want to be, laying juice with a favorite in a tournament. They get Cornell, then they get the winner, obviously, of Penn and Harvard. Harvard beat Yale on their home floor 67-65, and that was on the back of a monster night from Robert Hinson, who is the best guard in the Ivy, and is a matchup problem because he's also someone who rebounds extraordinarily well for his position at 6'5". He gets in the lane, he gets, on the glass. He does really anything he needs to be able to propel this Crimson team over the top. And if it happens to be Penn, by the way, Penn has played really well with Ethan Roberts back at full health. They beat the Crimson by 3 at home. They lost by just 1 in Cambridge, and they gave Yale a hell of a game, losing 74-70 in New Haven. So I hate Yale's draw. I can't bet them. I'm going to go Harvard in this one. Just value alone. I think I have the best guard. I have kind of this weird happenstance where Yale is immediately disadvantaged in the semifinal. So if I can get 5-1, I'd even probably play it at, 9-2. I'm going to go with the Crimson.
Yeah, there's not a lot of value in Yale as they're on the road for a true road game in the opener against Cornell. And Yale just has not looked as dominant in recent. Since the win on the road against Howard, where they completely escaped Washington, D.C., they were so unbelievably fortunate to get that win. The Bulldogs have had three separate two-possession wins. They just lost on this floor last week against Cornell. They struggled with Harvard and Penn, winning by 1 and 4 points respectively. I just don't think Yale is a shoe-in here, and they're priced as if they're a shoe-in to the final. If you do like Yale, I recommend a money line rollover because they're projected to be laying about 3.5 or 4, so that's a minus 190 on the money line, and then probably a minus 220 in the final, which comes out to plus 118. So don't take the futures price here and lay odds. Get a money line rollover and get yourself a number that starts with a plus sign on Yale. Interesting, there's some dichotomy in the pricing here because if you look at some of the books, Cornell is 285 or 330. But if you go to MGM, Cornell is plus 575. So if you like Cornell, bet it there. And Cornell is such an interesting team because, again, they host the tournament. They play blazing fast tempo. They could put a real scare into the Bulldogs like we just saw them do last week. These guys scored 111 points on their home floor in the season finale against Dartmouth. And they're going to let it rip from deep. More than half their shots are going to come from three-point range. They've got four shooters on the floor at any one point in time who can bury it from three. They're just very, very dangerous. They give up points in bunches, so it can make for a scary watch. But if the three ball is falling for Cornell, they could absolutely win this whole thing. The other thing that I will say is Harvard is as high as plus 480 in some spots. So get the best number on the Crimson. Don't take a 300 or a 350. Go get that 480. Harvard has the best defense in this conference. They've got the highest rating in effective field goal percentage from 2 and 3 point range on defense. They're a strong rim protecting defense, which the Ivy League is not normally equipped with. They just have no bench. They hardly play anyone outside of the starting five. And so in a back-to-back situation where you're going to have to win the second half and win the last 10 minutes of the second half in the championship game, I worry about the depth for Harvard. And lastly, Penn, I mean, you look at a team that's plus 750, and they're the hottest team in the Ivy League. They've won 7 out of 8 down the stretch. They had a 4 point loss against Yale that was sandwiched in there. But it's a hot shooting team. The defense forces a bunch of turnovers. It's a widely variant team that has widely variant outcomes. I'm not certain that Penn can threaten Yale, but they've got the Fran factor, and they can certainly threaten Cornell, who they swept in the regular season. So any one of the three, Harvard, Penn, Cornell, I think there's value. You got to really dive in and see which one is the better value. I don't mind Harvard because they have the best defense. I also think Cornell is dangerous because they're at home, but Penn at plus 750 is being priced like they just can't compete, and I think they can.
All right, let's turn to the Mountain West. A few things to note about the Mountain West right off the top. They finished eighth out of 31 conferences in terms of home team win percentage at 62% in those conference games. Altitude matters, great home court advantages, and that was only improved by the addition of Grand Canyon in the league this year. And the one stat that really popped to me, they finished second in blowout percentage of conference games with nearly 22% of their games ending in blowouts of 19 points or more. That was the second most blowout heavy league out of the 31 across the sport. And then let's just talk about the top teams here. Grand Canyon, special on defense, 18th nationally. Utah State, special on offense, 25th nationally. New Mexico, super balanced and only one really bad loss the entire year. So New Mexico State under Eric Olin, coming over from UC San Diego, bringing that magic. San Diego State defends the rim so well with Guath. Then they turn you over at a super high rate. but they were meh on the road. They just couldn't get it together and have any real wins in the last 6 weeks or so away from, Viejas Arena that impressed me or moved me at all. Now, the Lobos were swept by Boise this year, so there could be an early upset there in the quarters. Colorado State also finished strong, so I'd worry about San Diego State in the quarters as well. There's some top teams that I think, I wouldn't even blink if both of those teams got knocked out early. Looking at the top of the bracket, though, I'd need 6-1 on the Lopes, and it finally got there. I believe it's Caesars. So I'm going to go in on Grand Canyon at that number. I love their defense. They're coaching with Bryce Drew. Henley is a great go-to scorer when he's attacking the rim, when he doesn't fall in love with his jump shot and just puts his head down, gets the line a lot. And their X factor is the former Lou Henson Mid-Major Player of the Year in Brian Moore Jr., who came over from Norfolk State. He was trying to figure out for much of the season, how do I fit into this rotation? Am I the primary ball handler at times? Am I just feeding it to Henley, who's playing so well? Do I start to take over a little bit? He's a great shooter. He's somebody who shoots over 40% from three. He's a complete player. He distributes, he rebounds well for his position, rarely makes the wrong decision with the ball. And late in the year, I think it finally all clicked. You saw 3 games, I believe, in his last 4 or 5, where he went for double digits. They split with Utah State, so I don't think there's going to be much of a fear factor going up against the Aggies if they do meet them in this tournament. I'm in on GCU here. I think they have the guard play to get this done. This is the time of year when you want to hang your hat on guards that can just take over. That's what I see here. I don't mind them having to, lock horns with Utah State earlier and not just meeting them in the final. So I'm going to go here at 6-1. Walk me through who you think is going to win it, who you think is mispriced, and of these top teams, which one are you most fearful to even get a single win in this tournament?
It just seems like everybody at the top of the league is playing their worst basketball of the season. Utah State has lost 3 out of 5 to close the regular season. San Diego State has lost 4 out of 5. New Mexico has lost games. I mean, it's just these top 3 teams are playing their worst basketball down the stretch. And this is a tournament that has had some wacky stuff happen in the past. We've seen teams come out of nowhere to make deep runs. It was not that long ago that the Mountain West was considered to be a 3-bid league, and I don't think we're going to see anywhere close to that get into the NCAA tournament. A far cry from where this great basketball league once was. I don't have any interest at current in Utah State, San Diego State, or New Mexico because of that. You really make a good case for Grand Canyon. I mean, these guys were able to absolutely eat San Diego State alive on the boards in the second meeting on the road, and that was with the Aztecs getting Magoon Guath back in the fold. Grand Canyon can defend. They're patient offensively. Frankly, the path ain't bad for them either. So I look at a split with Utah State. They took them to the wire in the loss. Grand Canyon will have a chance here. Another team that I think is interesting is Boise State. They're plus 785 at Caesars. That's the best price I found. Just a real hot team right now. They've won 5 in a row to close out the regular season, and they've won 11 out of 14 games since January 16th. I think the draw sets up really nicely for Boise State. They get a first round matchup with San Jose State. They then match up against New Mexico, who I apologize to our producer David. The Lobos seem to be in free fall right now, and that would set up a potential semifinal with San Diego State, who is playing terrible basketball right now. I think it sets up well for Boise State to potentially make a deep run. But there's another interesting team out there at 80 to 1 over at MGM, Wyoming. I think this is a dangerous bunch, one that underperformed all season and is really flying under the radar. Wyoming beat UNLV during the regular season and they closed winning 5 out of 6 down the stretch. They took Utah State to the wire and they've defeated Nevada, Air Force, and Grand Canyon, all 3 of the potential semifinal matchup opponents later on in the regular season. At 80 to 1, this is absolutely a ham sandwich wager for me. Like Wyoming can win a couple of games here and then you'll have equity position in the wager. The complete wild card, in my opinion, is Colorado State. You talk about a hot bunch. They had won 8 in a row before a season finale loss against Boise State. It's just another team in the Rams that has underperformed all season. But Colorado State did defeat Colorado, South Florida, and Wichita State in the non-conference, and these guys have wins over San Diego State, Grand Canyon, New Mexico. They play very slow. They control the pace. They can shoot the lights out of the from deep. They can hit a bunch of threes. They just played in Thomas and Mack Arena against UNLV and scored 91 points. They were very comfortable shooting in this arena. I think there might be something here on the Rams.
All right, let's close out the entirety of our 7-part series on conference tournament previews with the MEAC. And I'm going to burst the bubble of anybody looking for a Cinderella or a long shot here. This is Howard's to lose, pure and simple. As Duck has said time and time again, you want to shop around. I'm okay with minus 300. I haven't done it for a single tournament this entire postseason, but there's a reason why they're priced this way. And I think, frankly, they should be minus 600 because the way that this conference tournament shook out, you had a team in this league that did not qualify in Coppin State because of their APR scores, and they're penalized for it. So what that's done is it's moved the 8-team league down to a 7-team league, giving Howard the only bye to the semifinals, which is a huge leg up. But then let's talk even broader. They closed on a MEAC conference run of 11-1 straight up. They were running people straight out of the gym. They beat Morgan State by 25 at their place. Norfolk season sweep. Central, they dropped a bomb on them in the last meeting. Since January 11th, this team is ranked 133rd per Torvik. That does not happen out of the MEAC all that often. The defense is approaching top 100 levels in Evan Mia and KenPom, second in effective field goal percentage defense in the nation. Killers on the offensive glass, and they get to the line a ton, which I really like when you start playing, at this time of year when you're playing away from home, neutral sites. You don't want to rely on the three-point shot, particularly some of these low major teams that can go ice cold. They don't need it. And then there's the coach, and I'd like to really focus on this for a second because frankly, I don't get it. Kenny Blakeney took a program that was in a full rebuild. He started 5-33. That should have killed him, should have killed his career. He should have probably been, given the brown packing box and walked out of the building. But instead, they said, we're going to give you time because we believe in what you're trying to build. And he also grew up playing for the legendary Morgan Wooden at DeMatha, then under Coach K at Duke. And he really learned how to teach the game, how to build the culture, and recruiting. He finally got a couple hits. He's taking them to the big dance in 2023, 2024, but this is his best team. Bryce Harris is going to have a really nice overseas professional career. He's someone who's 6'4", 220, multi-level scorer, turned himself into a great shooter this offseason, was not somebody who could consistently knock down the perimeter shots before this year. He's close to being a 50, 40, 80 kind of guy this year. Cedric Taylor, also a big-time scorer. Their size is clearly going to hurt them in the big dance because they're going to draw a 16 seed. They'll get smushed by Michigan or Duke or Arizona. It doesn't really matter. They're not going to be competitive. But in this league, they run this place. This is like there's no chance that they're going to get bullied by any of these teams. They went 11-3 against the spread in this league. Only Navy had a better cover rate in conference play in the entire country than Howard. So here's my pitch. Because Coppin State's out, they move to the semis. They're going to kill Norfolk or South Dakota State on a day's rest. So instead of Howard minus 310, if that is something that is just too difficult to swallow, you can go ahead, do double units, do 2 units on Howard minus 9, 10, 11. I'll go up to 12 in the semis against either Norfolk or South Carolina State, and then roll that winning up into a money line play in the title game. You should be able to get better than obviously a minus 310 to start. I just view this as the best coach. I think he's short for this job. I think this will be his last MEAC conference tournament. He's going to move up. It's time. He's earned it. When you take a program to the NCAA tournament 3 times in 4 years, if they cut down the nets here, I think it's time for him to get himself a nice mid-major job. And then they just have the best backcourt. They got the best players here. And I don't really see a team that matches up well with them at all, evidenced by the fact that they just killed everybody against the spread this season. It's Howard. It's Howard. It's Howard. Any final thoughts on the MEAC, Duck?
I mean, there's only one way to look here, and even at minus 300, when you look at the MEAC in totality, they have 6 of the bottom 12 teams in the country who play in this league. It's really, really bad offense. Half the teams in the MEAC rank in the bottom 10 in all of Division One college basketball in terms of offensive efficiency. You're going to have a ton of missed shots. You're going to have putbacks at the rim that don't go in, turnovers. It's going to be sloppy basketball all around. Howard is the only team in this league that has any resemblance of a competent offense. And they're not exceedingly dynamic, but in this league, they're dominant. Bryce Harris and Cedric Taylor are decent scorers. Alex Cotton might be the best three-point shooter in this league. And it's really the defense that separates themselves. With Howard, they swept 4 CAA opponents this year. They beat North Carolina A&T, Hampton, Drexel, and North Carolina Wilmington, if you can believe that. Nobody else in this league has a winning record. They are the clear favorites and deservedly so. If there's any other way to look, if you're trying to grasp at straws for a long shot, You could have short cases to be made for a team like Morgan State at 15 or 16 to 1 or Maryland Eastern Shore at 22 to 1. But what you're betting on is you're betting on them to advance to the final and for Norfolk State to pull a miracle and upset Howard. So then neither one of those teams have to play Howard in the final. Because otherwise, what you're going to have is you're going to have Howard laying 18 or so in the title game. So buyback is going to be very challenging and would require a ton of capital. So it's not going to be an overly competitive tournament, or at least on paper, it shouldn't be. Nobody in this league outside of Howard is any good. The winner is likely headed to Dayton. It's just tough here because Howard is so much better, and you would need to deploy a ton of capital the other way to try to hedge out later. So you would have to be making a bet on anyone else and hoping and praying that Howard would get upset by Norfolk State, who I think is the only realistic team that has any chance whatsoever to beat them. This is Howard's tournament to lose.
Of these five leagues, Duck, which pick to win it is your favorite?
I mean, the Mountain West is very wide open. I think the A10 is very, very wide open. Um, The MAC is going to be a fun tournament. I think it's going to be some exciting basketball. I think there's a great price on Akron still to be had. Again, I don't love laying odds here on these futures, but this is one where I think Akron should probably be about minus 180. We've already seen Miami of Ohio get longer odds from, let's call it plus 150 all the way to like plus 225 now. So people are starting to realize who the cream of the crop is in the MAC. They have a great path. I think it's a no-brainer that Akron gets to the final. It's just a matter of how many they're going to win by, and then it puts the pressure on the committee to make the MAC a two-bid league.
I'm with you. Akron's my favorite one from this episode. All right, for Duck, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the entirety of our conference preview series. And we are just getting warmed up because obviously we have the Big Dance Selection Sunday coming up. We're going to do live shows. We're going to go through shows on our YouTube channel. So be sure to check those out. And we're going to break down every single region, every single angle to try to get you in the best position to hit the ground running when they start playing these games in Dayton for the play-in. That's it, Duck. Any final thoughts before we sign off here? This labor of love is done. A huge shout out to Stucky because he has been the brains behind all of it, just orchestrating, setting up all the pairings, bringing in experts from different leagues. It's been exciting to hear different voices give that, incredible specifics, getting granular on leagues like the MAC, like the America East. It's something that I think differentiates our brand. So a huge shout out to Stucky for that and doing it all with a 4-month-old at home. The man has never been much for sleep, but he's really pushing the boundaries. Any final thoughts here, Duck?
Yeah, we've certainly experienced a lot of compression here the last couple of weeks with all the conference tournaments ramping up. We have another week of that as we inch closer to Selection Sunday. It's going to be real fun to see the bracket revealed, to be able to break down those first round matchups, the first four matchups as well in Dayton, and just enjoy every minute of it because it's not going to be long here and this season's going to be over and all you'll have is baseball and summertime activities before we get ready for college football season again. So enjoy the compression, enjoy the madness. We're working hard behind the scenes to try to get everybody to the window, and we're going to keep finding value in these conference tournaments and the individual matchups and beyond.
You guys can support us by subscribing to the YouTube channel, liking, commenting, also going to wherever you listen to the pod and giving a 5-star rating and review as well. We'd love to give out another futures ticket. So if you give us a 5-star rating and review the next episode that Duck and I host, we'll go ahead and pick one out and throw you, let's call it a $50 future on whatever you want, a regional champ, a national champ, team to go to the Sweet 16, whatever you want it to be. All right, that's it for us. Thank you so much for listening. Best of luck with all your bets, and we'll see you at the window.